For today's Mindset Monday, mental weather. Mild gusts today with morning stupidity leading into evening frustrations. So just so everybody knows, if you have not been here before, on Mondays, we have a different theme for every single month. So the first month was fresh starts and goal setting. Bro, I'll do that before we get into it too much. January is fresh starts and goal setting. February is self-love and confidence. April is growth and resilience, so on and so forth. So today we are talking about the importance of self-compassion. Let me do this card before we get into it. But it is open-mindedness. I cultivate and maintain an open mind that is ready and willing to be pleasantly surprised. Rather than write off new ideas, I stop assuming that they won't work. Rather than write off new associates, I stop assuming I won't like them. Instead, I dare them all to prove me wrong. What a pleasure it'll be to lose that bet. And if it turns out my negative instinct was right, well, told you so. So for today, importance of self-love and compassion. I typically like to ask a couple questions first to kind of get us to start talking about it. And then I like to share information about it and hopefully some mindset adjustments or things that will just kind of help you view it a little bit differently. So the first question that I wanted to ask you guys is just, how do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? I have been getting slightly better at this. I definitely feel I've started to try to get myself in the mindset of all mistakes are just a learning experience. But I tend to, like, say, for example, if I'm having a bad stream or if something happens, that I'm like, oh, you're just a bad person and you suck, right? Which is not self-compassionate. But I just kind of wanted to see if you guys are similar to me or if you guys are much better at that. You laugh and I say, duh. At least you can just laugh at it. Call myself a dumbass and do better. Yeah, okay, so kind of the same realm as mine. Oh, I am not kind to myself when I screw up usually. Sometimes I don't care that I made a mistake and I just carry on. Usually okay with it as well. I fucked up. What can I do to not repeat the mistake? I like that, bro. Donuts, it's a good one. All mistakes are learning experiences. We got to bring up Albert Einstein again. No, we don't have to get back into the same things. Last week we talked about perfectionism and in that way. And I do think a lot of these topics do overlap in a lot of different ways. But there's a little bit more that we can learn for each different topic. Used to be a bully to myself, and then I learned to externalize self-talk and talk to the me that made a mistake the way I would talk to a friend that made the same mistake. I love that, Dano. And that is one of my bullet points that we were going to be talking about. But this idea of treating yourself like you would treat others, I think that's perfect. Fizzy, calling myself names that don't need to be repeated here has made me go to the gym so many times. I think that there is a, we all respond to different things in different ways, right? Like for some of us, like we are competitive or it helps to, but it can also be damaging in other ways. I love how we're like kind of talking about the mindset topic, but then we have like weather conversations at the same time too. No, Eclipse, that's way too hot. Luther, mistakes are learning experiences. Yeah, and being lighthearted on yourself allows for being lighthearted on others. I like that. I think that is very true. You look in the mirror and say, I am Mr. Awesome, which honestly, I think is a great thing to do. It's basically like an affirmator. Fudge, that was not good, stupid. Take a deep breath. Let's fix this. Honestly, Akari, I like that. Like, you don't dwell on it. You just go, whoops. All right, how can we move past this? Vinny, for this morning, for example, I started swearing and immediately proceeds to walk to one of my colleagues just to make fun of the situation. So you just make light of it. I like that. Brono, for me, it depends on the type of mistake. For some small mistakes, I usually just fix things, work on ways to not repeat it, and call myself silly names, but in a funny way, not in a super self-depreciating way. But for big mistakes, I do struggle. I usually need to ground and isolate myself in order to not let my frustration leak into others. Still working on that. I feel like I'm with you on that one, Brodo. And Tano, expanding, an old boss told me, don't tell me you're sorry. Tell me what you're going to do about it. And that combined with the externalized self-talk provides a good platform to address challenges. I like that. Honestly, it reminds me of, and this is slightly off topic, but it reminds me of, I think we just throw around the word I'm sorry a lot. Like we use it to like either make it sound like we did something wrong rather than just making up for the situation or, saying sorry if you don't mean it. Like I think it's much better to talk about the things that you have control over rather than just being like, I'm sorry. Don't tell me you're sorry. Show me by fixing, mitigating it, and moving forward. Indeed, indeed. Okay, so that was the first question. How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? The second one is, what is one way that you show yourself kindness during tough times? I'm trying to think if I have any. I think my version of kindness is getting really cozy. Like I always try to get a cup of tea and curl up with a book, or rather than telling myself that I have to get everything done now, that it is okay to be gentle and relax. I think that's my main thing I've been working on. Does anybody else have anything? The most important thing of making mistakes is knowing that the only stupid mistakes are the ones we ignore and don't learn from. Exactly. Oh man, kindness during hard times. That's a slippery slope. You buy myself expensive things. It's a bad habit. My gin. I don't. So far sounds like we're not very good at being kind to ourselves, huh? Anybody? Dog always grounds me. Hanging out with animals and your pets. Ikari, I kind of don't. Yeah, see, that's kind of where I'm at too. I was like, shit. This is calling me out a bit. But really depends on what you mean by kindness. Self-care for my mental. I load up Stellaris and I try to put myself in a comfortable spot with my dog and relax. How I try to talk to myself when I'm going through it, like now. I'm not comfortable sharing that with everyone here, frankly, but it relates to my beloved. Yeah, we've talked about that a little. I think another thing that makes me think of Moivan is that there is a difference between relaxing and recharging. So like self-care for your mentals, there's kind of this idea of, I think you can play video games or you can read books or you can do things that is relaxing, but it doesn't necessarily give you energy. Like I would argue that, and maybe it's different for different people. At least for me, video games is a way to like kind of numb out. Like if I'm playing hours and hours of League of Legends, I'm not having to think about anything hard, so it's kind of a self-care thing, but I also don't get a lot of internal joy from that. And so learning new things tends to help me with that. So like doing the chainmail, or if it is a really good book that I like. And so it's kind of hard to find the distinction between doing things that just are, that feel like they're relaxing versus things that actually bring you true joy and are like showing kindness to yourself. Luther, being kind to yourself during tough times. Acceptance that we all make mistakes and not judge and beat yourself up over it is good. It's indeed. I show myself kindness by allowing forgiveness to supersede anxiety. Worrying about something I can't change is just paying interest in advance. By allowing myself forgiveness, I excuse myself from worrying about things that I can't change in the moment. Oh, that's a really good one. Easier said than done, but really good. Allowing myself to unwind after a tough week of work. Indeed. We's all human. Yeah. I make good, easy food and watch a comfort movie series. Oh, the food. Good food. I forgot about that one. That's a good one. Shout out to Ponyo and Little Miss Sunshine for supporting myself when I feel like everything is falling apart. Also, journaling is always my go-to to put myself in the tracks. Oh, Ponyo, I love it. Games like Stellaris give my mind something to focus on and exclude all other thoughts, sometimes to my detriment, like realizing it's 2:30 p.m. now. And games like Warframe, the mind-numbing game, turn my brain off fully. Yeah, exactly. So I think different games kind of do different things, right? Now, also, baking bread has been comforting in my not-so-great mental moments. Moivan, I wish I lived closer so you could bake me bread, too. He needs to be taken care of, and they sense and reciprocate. Problems and intensities are listened. That's true. That is true. Ponyo is my go-to when I need to be kind and forget and change mindset. Little Miss Sunshine is my go-to when I need to face my feelings. I like that. I like it. Smoke tobacco pipe like a wizard. Just sit outside in silence. Honestly, Luther, that's actually a really good one. I remember reading somewhere where the sitting and doing nothing is one of the most underrated things for your mental health, because we live in a society now that is so fast-paced, and you are constantly either scrolling on your phone or like watching something or doing something, and just sitting there and letting your brain wander or trying not to think about anything at all can be really, really good for you. Yeah, just appreciate life and the world around you. I love that. I love it. Journaling has been helping you a hell of a ton, and doing it in Tangor scratches that specific nerdage part of my brain. Van, I love that so much. You sit and do nothing every morning. I don't work. I sit outside regardless of the weather. Just sit and drink your coffee in peace. I think that's perfect. I love that so much. Just getting in some sun, going out to touch grass will help shift my mental in such a big way. Sometimes being in the house puts me in a state of isolation and makes intrusive thoughts that much louder. Of course, reading and gaming are great for zoning out, but it's more of a distraction for me, as you said before. Exactly. I think it's very true of one is like a way of distracting your brain. One is a way of feeling like you're actually connected. Luther, yeah, it's very relaxing. Helps restore my mood. Allows me to find value in the smaller things. No, I don't think that's weird at all. I think that's wonderful. I think it's kind of that stop and smell the roses sort of mentality. Food can be one of them that I give myself, though more that way I don't want to cook food. That's true. Some people I know cooking feels like a self-care activity. For me, that's not the case. I leave my phone and all the tech inside. Any distraction just kind of deletes the purpose of chilling. Yeah, honestly, I stopped doing it. I used to do unplugged Sundays where I didn't get on my phone at all, and I think I need to start doing that again. It's been a while, and I noticed a huge difference in my mentality when I did. And you forget that you use phone and screens and stuff so much for distraction that sometimes I sit there and I'm like, what can I do? Most of the time I ended up reading, but it's like you could puzzle, you could do crafts. There's so many things that you can do without being on technology, but you stop thinking about that as much, I think. Yeah, my ADHD really hates that do nothing idea. I can't even watch TV without something. Yeah, I mean, like when I do chainmail, I walk on my treadmill and I do chainmail and listen to a book all at the same time. But I would argue that the things that you struggle with are the things that you probably need the most. So like that was my big motto when I was teaching yoga, that in the same way that like if you're trying to do a pose, like if your hamstrings are really tight and you can't get into a pose, that means you need to stretch your hamstring more. In the same way that like if your mind is really crazy and you hate doing meditation, probably means that you need to sit and breathe and do more meditation. Okay, so then the last question that I have, do you believe that self-compassion makes you stronger, and why or why not? Is my last question before we get into the info. Luther, well, yes, naturally, self-compassion is healthy as long as it isn't overdone where it borderlines narcissistic. There's that old saying of you can't love others if you don't love yourself. What you give yourself, you'll give to others. Yeah, I like one of my favorite metaphors is kind of like that the whole airplane saying, right, where they say, you know, you put the mask on yourself before assisting others. And I think that works in the same way that it's easier to care for others if you can make sure that you are taking care of yourself first. Brodo, self-compassion does make you strong. Being only critical of ourselves without space to celebrate the small victories and give ourselves rest for the good work doesn't lead to growth, in my opinion. The same way that only praising yourself without any space for criticism is bad for you. You need a balance. I think that's a really good point, too, that it's like, I don't want... I don't know if there's a balance with... I think self-compassion as a whole, like what the word is, I don't think that there is probably too much of that. I think if self-compassion turns into narcissism or something like that, right? Like if you are then getting self-involved, I think that turns into something different than being self-compassionate. There's truth that you can have a balance with like trying to think of the right words. Because I know what you're saying, Brodo. It's really important for growth to be able to like look at what there is that you can work on. But I don't know. I don't know if there is. I guess that's another question too. Is like, is there a level of too much self-compassion? But I would almost argue that it does kind of turn into something different at that point. Depends on if it isn't self-crippling. But what part of self-compassion would be self-crippling? Like if you were just like, oh, I'm so good, I don't do anything. Then it does. One of the most common forms of self-compassion that many have difficulty with is self-forgiveness, me included. If we were able to forgive ourselves and let go, we'll be able to move forward and take on new challenges without being chained to past errors. Yeah. Oh, self-forgiveness. That's a tough one for sure. Luther, yeah, I agree with Brodo. Balance. If you're mindful of negative things that you can improve on, then it'd be kind to yourself in a sense. It builds character and structure within, allowing yourself to grow as a person. I think it's about the wording too. Yeah, people who practice too much self-compassion to the point that it turns into narcissism won't say it's narcissism. That's true. So you're saying like if you can be like, oh, I'm just being self-compassionate, but it's... I think the core of the word self-compassion, there isn't... Like, I don't think you could give yourself too much self-compassion. You just also need to find balance with other things in life. They will say that they're having self-compassion the same way that people call cutting people off without any talk whatsoever establishing boundaries. Yeah, that's true. Right? Like ghosting somebody and being like, "Oh, I was just setting my boundary." And it's like, "Well, that's not how you communicate." But I mean, it is a boundary in a way. Balance is key. Krypton, I absolutely love hearing you work your thoughts out. It shows that you really take everything in and try to think critically about the feedback. The conversations are so mentally stimulating, and I love that you provide the space for it. Thank you, Krypton. I appreciate that. So sometimes I feel like an idiot, but I think that's also kind of the point. Like, we try to create the safe space where we can talk about these things, and I mean, I don't have all the answers. And I think it's also important to preface with the fact that, like, yeah, I am a certified like health and life coach. I got one of those certifications a long time ago, but I'm not a certified psychiatrist or therapist or any of the things, right? Like, this is just purely opinion based and research backed. I do a lot of I said do I do a lot of reading and other things, but I think that's why this is really cool, because you do get to see a lot of different people's opinions on things. And I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's just different people think about things differently. You can't grow if you're not critical on yourself in a fair amount. Yeah, so we'll get into that when I talk about the content, because I am kind of curious about what you guys think about what healthy criticism and being critical looks like. Because I agree. I mean, I am one of those people. I exist off of self-criticism. Like, that's my identity, which is not necessarily a good thing. But yeah, I look for everything that can ever go wrong or everything that I am not doing well rather than what I am. So we'll chat about that here in a second. Let's see. There's a saying that says, in theory, there isn't a difference between practice and theory. And practice there is. Do you do these types of things? Yeah, we do this every Monday, Luther. So we have a different topic. So today is importance of self-compassion. Next week is building confidence. The week after that's turning negative self-talk into positive action. So, and a lot of these end up overlapping, right? It's similar content and topics, or it all kind of combines. But I think different points come up. Different people pop in to talk about things. So I always think that it's beneficial regardless. Then it depends on what you're doing it for. Like Brodo said, if you're looking to give some kindness to others, show it to yourself first. If you're only doing it to yourself to the detriment of others, then that's when it becomes narcissistic. I'm not even sure if you can call it compassion at that point. It all depends on the mindset that you have when going into it. Exactly. See, but that's my point, right? Is that at that point, I don't even think that that's not compassion. That's just being self-absorbed. It's kind of like a group therapy. No, being open to other opinions and really introspecting on things is so important. I have these types of conversations with Layla all the time. And one of the things that I love is when we're both comfortable with silence, which happens a lot because we give each other the space to take time to think. I like that. One of the things that I've done a lot is I just fill silences with saying like, or like, or really, or right, or different things. And I'm trying to be better at that as well, of finding people that you just feel comfortable being silent with and thinking. And also on stream, knowing that it's okay to just sit and think. But also I'm ADHD, so my brain just keeps going blah, 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 constantly. Kai, hello. Health criticism. Tiz, you're doing great. Unhealthy criticism. Tiz, you're doing great. Yeah, but what if I'm not? Being critical on yourself? No. Me? Yeah, Tiz is never critical on yourself. Much. You guys know me too well. You appreciate this type of content. It's fun, and one can learn from others. Yeah. Well, we do it every Monday. So for me, the good kind of criticism is the one that makes you ask more questions, not the one that shuts you down. When your criticism turns into, I can do this better, and not into, I'm fucking awful at this. Yep. I think that's a very good definition. Like, there's I think, and the line there is the difference between constructive criticism or feedback, I guess, or essentially just belittling and putting yourself down. So from that, I always like to look up some some bit of like mindset information to give you on top of it. So we have these discussions, and then I always look up things, or I have a lot of books on different topics, and then I kind of jot down points of things to share with you, so that it's kind of like a, I don't know, here's some information, take it or leave it as you will, but hopefully you find something helpful from it. And I actually found this article that came with this giant graphic that's just the scientific benefits of self-compassion by a doctor from Stanford Medicine. And so I kind of figured we'd just kind of go through this, and I would post the graphic in the Discord if anybody finds it helpful. And so basically what they talk about in here too is that society really does teach us to be perfect and achieve more, and whoever is winning and working the hardest and making the most money, that is like the definition of success. But there's nothing wrong with having a goal or having an objective, but also I think life is about more than that. Like we talked about with kind of Luther earlier, and stopping and smelling the roses, or sitting and just appreciating the small joys. Like life is more about just going 110% all of the time. And so the issue is when some people struggle to stop doing that. Like if you are continually being self-critical, and instead of improving yourself, your objectives end up kind of standing in your way. And so there's research that is now showing that self-compassion is a better alternative to being self-critical. And one of the biggest like little graphics I remember seeing, if you are only ever self-critical without acknowledging the things that you're doing well, it's not helpful. You're just being mean to yourself. And I was like, So, like Broda was saying, there needs to be a balance in all things. Like you can say, hey, this is something that I need to work on and that I want to grow with, but you also need to have self-compassion and recognize the things that you have been doing well. Balance is always the word. Indeed, indeed. There's quite a bit for you to work on there as well. Yeah. So the biggest thing is self-criticism. It's self-defeating because we not only are we critical about ourselves, I think we end up comparing ourselves to others as well. And so you're like trying to compete with other people and trying to be the best at things. And really what that ends up doing is making people feel insecure and anxious and over self-critical, and all of that just kind of makes you miserable, right? And then also when you are faced with criticism, you end up feeling defensive and feeling crushed. Does anybody struggle with that with, like, say, partners or friends, where if somebody tries to give you a piece of even just like constructive criticism, like, hey, you know, I don't really like when you do this, you're like, oh my God, I'm just a horrible person then? Anyone? Is that just me? I am, and it's something that I recognized in my family too. Like when I go home, me, my mom, my sister all do this thing where if somebody says like, hey, this is how I'm feeling, we take it as almost like an attack on ourselves and then feel guilty or feel like we did something wrong. And so the natural reaction is just to get defensive. And that's like, it kind of takes the whole point out of it, right? Because then you can't even hear how the other person is feeling. You're just like, oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm so terrible. And it's like, oh no, I hurt your feelings, I'm sorry. And Dana, no assumption of positive intent. Otherwise, why would I keep that friend around? Much better practice. You don't like a thing I do, you hate me. Exactly. Yeah, I've started to see that, and not an evil thing. Yeah, well, and I think it's also important to not be like, oh shit, I do that, I'm terrible that I do that, because then you're just doing it more. But to be able to look at it and be like, maybe this is something that I can practice getting a little bit better at. And notice that if you're getting defensive, what you can do instead. And because so the next like piece of that is competition instead of strengthening relationships just ends up making people feel isolated. And same kind of thing with like the streaming world, right? Like if you are a streamer and you're focused on just trying to do better than all the other streamers around, you end up feeling really, really lonely, which is like part of the reason that I made this stream team and stuff, is that if you're a group of people that you're all working towards the same means of growing and sharing your interests with a wider audience, then you're helping support each other and you're not separated. It's not like you're all individual streamers. It's kind of like you're a community of streamers instead. So self-criticism and competition kind of just get in our way of the primary goal, which for human nature a lot of the times is to be successful and to be or to feel like you belong somewhere and to be loved. Let me just catch up on chat and I'll talk about the next part. You're critical of myself because I had a lot of internal problems and felt like whatever I was doing wasn't good enough. Oh, the not good enough. I think growing up, I was exactly the same way. It was either felt like not good enough or too much, right? There never felt like there was a in between of, oh, you're okay just the way that you are. It's, why do you do things like that? Why are you doing this? Like, oh, I'm just too much of this. And then like, why didn't you do this and not good enough at something else? Vinny, in this society, we only see the good parts of others. So we're even more critical on ourselves because we have unrealistic view on life. Just in general, like you see, like social media, you see all the positive parts. So you don't really see the difficulties. My childhood has been filled with suppression. I am trauma. Yeah, right? Well, and the saddest part about that is like I had amazing parents. I love my family. Did they fuck me up in ways on accident? Totally. And I think that happens. I don't think anyone is raised perfectly. And we all come out of childhood being a little bit messed up in a lot of different ways. And I expect and encourage my friends to hold me accountable. And they expect the same of me. It's how we grow together. I love that, Dano. And Krypton, yeah, I definitely relate to that. And then I start to beat myself up for not being more self-aware, noticing it myself. But I also have to remember that I would rather them tell me instead of just continuing to do it and deteriorate the relationship over time. Exactly. For me, I think it was what became really important was finding friends that I knew I could be honest with. Because there are those relationships with people that you just never know for sure if it's if they are telling you what you want to hear. And so finding people that can be bluntly honest, which is why I love other neurospicy friends, because they can be like, you're being too loud. And you're like, okay, well, can you just ask me to be quiet instead of telling me that I'm too loud? We're working on communication. But yeah. Moyvan, I really don't experience that situation. I'm assuming I'm terrible when people bring criticism to me. I take everything as face value, think, oh, damn, they must actually care since they're bringing this up to me directly and work on challenging the behaviors in question. No, that's much healthier, Moyvan. I'm glad that you do not have the same kind of trauma that I do. Brodo, also when you turn on thinking you're a horrible person because someone pointed something out, you kind of enter the victim mindset instead of trying to work on making yourself better. Instead of seeing how you're negatively affecting others, you make that about yourself. I've worked on that way too much in therapy. Exactly, right? That's something that I've been working on in my relationship a lot is both of us tend to say like, hey, this is something that's bugging me. And then the other person's like, well, hey, this is also bugging me, or this is something that's bugging me. And that rather than us being able to hear the other person, we're just covering it up with something else. And so we're trying to do a lot better at saying like, hey, this is something that I'm upset with, and then talking through that thing first. And then once that person feels heard and understood, then it's like, hey, is this a time and space for me to also talk about how I've been feeling? And not have it feel like it's almost this like you said, either the victim mindset or the like, who is more hurt? It's how can we both feel heard and understood. Mooney, 100%. I love my mommy and grandma, but our culture fucked me up so good. I feel right. I came in my childhood not allowed to feel. I think a lot of, especially males, I think come out of childhood being raised in a way that is like, to be strong is to not show emotions. And I think that's kind of fucked up. I think the basis of being human is being able to express yourself and being able to talk about your emotions, because also if you don't know how to express it in a healthy way, then it comes out sideways, right? Like you end up with a bunch of people that just carry around a lot of anger and a lot of other things that sometimes it's just like sadness and they just need a hug. I love my family, but Jesus Christ. You're right, Brodo. And just emotional suppression from being a youngin', not much else there. Now adulthood, that's been a fucking experience. Life is an experience in a whole. Asian culture in general is like that. is much more emotional suppression. You mean donuts? Luther, I've witnessed a lot of things, and I've had a few spiritual experiences that set me down a path quest where, well, it's really too much to type in chat, but learning to forgive yourself and others and admit your own core faults. That's a hard thing to do, and you can't really plant seeds to grow if you aren't able to till the soil. Sorry, I was just sitting with that for a second. I think that's actually a really, really good point. That sometimes I think we jump into this idea of like mindset and learning and we're growing and we're doing this. But if you don't get to the root of the issue, it is really hard to change these things. I like that. You can't plant the seeds to grow if you aren't able to till the soil. I used to carry around a lot of anger, and then I found an outlet. I beat the crap out of the heavy bag. It's a healthier outlet, but also being able to talk about your emotions is important. Life comes at you fast when you never expect it, both good and bad ones. Indeed. And donuts, yeah, you bottle it inside, your feelings don't matter. Suck it up, contribute to society. Yeah, I think... and that is what's interesting, is I do think different cultures do focus on different things. Brock, I can't talk about them like you said. It comes out very sideways. But for me, it comes out sideways, reversed, upside down, and backwards all at the same time. Brock, honestly, though, even you admitting that and saying like, hey, yeah, I am aware that I don't talk about it very well. That is a really big acknowledgement and a huge step. And even saying that much, I think when you first joined chat, you never would have said something like that. So I'm proud of you for kind of realizing that. And at least to me, that feels like a self-growth and something that I think is important to recognize. Muy bien, I will say that sometimes the mentality of suck it up and keep moving has kept me going in general. Can't make it a permanent choice when I have shit to do and take care of. Yeah, I mean, there is a reason that fake it till you make it is like kind of works. And this idea of visualization and mentality, that there is sometimes you kind of just have to get yourself through these hard times and to keep pushing to be able to get to where you need. But I think that is kind of different too than you can do that and also still give yourself self-compassion at the same time. Which, so speaking of, so we were talking about how self-criticism can be really detrimental. And then on the flip side of that, self-compassion is the healthier alternative, because then rather than when we fail, if we feel inadequate, a lot of times we fall into this trap of self-criticism and telling ourselves that like we are too much or not enough. I don't know if anybody else is like that, like I am, but yeah, when I don't do well, there's a lot of self-criticism that usually goes along with that. And so self-compassion is a source of empowerment. It helps you learn more. I think it builds more inner strength to be able to be like, I messed up and I can acknowledge that. And also I can also be gentle with myself and still look at where I can improve without saying like, I'm a terrible person because I did this, or I hate myself now because I'm doing something wrong. Fuzzy, you were raised by a Catholic military dad and a Muslim Lebanese stepmom. Feelings in my family are wildly complicated too. Those dynamics sometimes are so interesting. I'm Brock. Well, thank you Mondays for that. They help. That's the kind of shit that makes me cry. Is that like, I'm always like, if just talking about these things helps even like one or two people live their lives a little bit better, then I don't know. I think that is the true joy of streaming on Twitch and having a community that is really supportive and takes time to have conversations like this. Sometimes it's okay to feel the feelings as well. Feel and accept. Yes. Well, so that's great segue, Akari, because self-compassion helps to lead to resilience as well. And it involves facing your failures, your insecurities, your mistakes in a different way. So rather than giving yourself self-criticism, self-compassion is about building that resilience, about more of that strength and that happiness. And it involves 3 things, which I will tell you once I finish saying hi to Kevin, everybody. Learning how to channel fault or negative energy into a positive thing that can be difficult. Using weaknesses as a strength, you know? Indeed. And I think that's another thing of too much self-compassion isn't exactly narcissism, but just enabling bad habits, enabling you to keep procrastinate and enabling you not to work on anything because it's self-care time. Sure, but I think that's also, I think self-care and avoidance is also different. Like, if you truly need self-care and you're giving yourself that, I think that is something that is necessary. If you are just avoiding and procrastinating, that's something a little bit different in that way. Yeah. Well, okay. So let me clarify by what I mean with compassion too, because it talks about self-compassion involving three things. The first one is self-kindness. The second one is common humanity, and the third one is mindfulness. And so by self-kindness, that just means being kind and understanding of oneself as one would a friend. So like Dano said, we need to understand that we are all intrinsically deserving of care and concern, just like everybody else is. And this is an interesting one too, because I do think that compassionate people are not always self-compassionate. Just because someone's really, really kind to other people does not mean that they are also self-compassionate. And some of the kindest people in the world also, like, my mom pops into my head, where she is so good at taking care of everybody else, but is so bad at taking care of herself. Like, she's constantly concerned about everyone else. And then I'll walk in and she'll be sitting there crying. And I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I'm just so tired. And it's like, okay, well then rest. Like, take care of yourself. Like, that is also important. So people forget to extend that kindness that you show to other people to yourself. And I think that that's really important. So that's the first kind of pillar is self-kindness. The second one, common humanity, which is basically just understanding that you are not alone in your mistakes and your failures and the weaknesses. Like, as humans, we all go through many of these things, sometimes the same things. And that is part of being human, that all of those things are part of normal everyday life. And to be really self-critical and beat yourself up over something, it's almost like being like, oh, I'm the only one that ever does this. And it's like, no, you can be like, oh yeah, we're just human, and I can recognize that. And sure, it can be something that I want to grow up with, but I don't have to make myself into a bad person because of it. And then the last part of that is mindfulness, which is just being aware of your emotions without over identifying with them. And this is the biggest thing for me, is because sometimes, like, I'll get upset and then it's like, oh, well, no, that just makes me a shitty person and I'm just terrible and I'm just like, I'm too hard on myself because of it. And really, you can just validate that emotion without adding fuel to the fire. Like, you can say you messed up and you hurt somebody's feelings, and then you feel guilty and you feel sad, and it's all these things. But rather than internalizing that and being like, oh, I'm a bad person because of it, you can be like, oof, I feel really sad because I really didn't mean to. But rather than making it about yourself, you can still give compassion to yourself while being kind and being able to acknowledge other people's feelings. Does that make sense? I know I just threw a lot of things at you guys, but let me just read chat real quick. Amanda, sometimes people who care most about others forget about themselves the most. Yeah. And I even remember hearing something about sometimes the happiest people are Fizzy. I just saw the beginning of your thing too, but sometimes the happiest people underneath the surface have the most going on. Like, Fizzy, like what you said, Robin Williams, such a great example of that, brought so much joy to the world as anyone, but obviously couldn't take care of himself. And Brodo, I agree with what you're saying, but also with the popularization of this type of talk on the internet, gives people the wrong idea, if that makes sense. Again, in theory, everything makes a lot of sense, and I agree, but in practice, in internet mainly, people often distort terms to fit their beliefs, including self-care and self-compassion. Also, for people who don't have the self-awareness and the general knowledge, they also don't know the limits between self-compassion and enabling and narcissism. Yeah, but like I talked about, Brodo, that I think that is more an issue of people mislabeling things, because I don't think self-kindness, self-compassion as a core of what they truly are. There is no such thing as giving yourself too much self-compassion for something. If that turns into any of these other things that you're mentioning, right? Like enabling or avoiding or procrastinating or any of those other things, that's it becoming something else. And I think I would agree that I think people sometimes mislabel them, where they're like, oh yeah, I'm just doing self-care, when really you're avoiding. Like, it ends up being a language thing in some ways. Vinny, there were a lot of things from my childhood and teen years that I need to process and get over, basically because I got told to ignore things that hurt me mentally. And I would say, as like a little side note to all my little neurospicy beans, and I don't know if you guys agree or how people feel about it, but for me, growing up as undiagnosed and feeling like I never quite fit in, it was always this kind of this, I don't know the best way to word it, but it was this constant need to try to do everything right and hyper analyze how I was supposed to be acting and how everyone was supposed to feel, because I didn't feel like I felt the same way everyone else did. And so that led to a lot of really weird brain patterns now, to where I'm trying to be a lot better at just recognizing, like, oh, I am just overly sensitive about some of these things. Well, not overly. I am just sensitive. See, even my language, it's really hard for me to talk about it in a way that is not like self-critical or belittling. Acknowledging that, yes, I am sensitive, and yes, my brain works differently, and that is okay. And it can be a struggle with some things, but that just acknowledging that difference and learning to speak about it in a way that isn't negative. Like, it's not that I am, that my brain is wrong or broken. It's just different, I think, could be really important. And Frodo, yeah, I agree with you. I just think it's also important to point the limits and things. Yeah, I think that is true. But so in general, I think those are kind of like the three core things. So self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness is important when it comes to self-compassion. And I think it is something that is learnable. And the first step of that is just recognizing how you respond to failure, which is kind of what we talked about at the beginning a little bit. And choose those three elements, like recognizing that we're all human. I can look at my emotions and just acknowledge it. And I can be kind and understanding rather than jumping straight to self-criticism. And then that's to say, that's not that there aren't things that you could still work on, but not just jumping into like belittling yourself. And self-compassion, it's not being lazy. It's not having no drive in life. And so like there are times of, it said something, let me see, what did it say? Yeah, so it says that self-compassion is not being lazy or having no objective in times of overindulgence and laziness. So Brodo, this is kind of what you were saying. In times of overindulgence and laziness, self-compassion often involves toughening up and still taking responsibility. So self-compassion doesn't always mean like self-care. Self-compassion can also mean getting shit done, but still being gentle with yourself, like to not beat yourself up, if that makes sense. There's sometimes this misconception that self-compassion means like, oh, I'm just taking it easy on me. But self-compassion can be getting shit done, right? But not being a dick to yourself at the same time. And Amanda, this is definitely something I need to work on, in part because I keep accidentally dating narcissists who make me feel terrible about myself. Amanda, that honestly, that is a really good point, that sometimes the people you date are a reflection of either A, the lessons that you need to learn, or B, well, actually, no, I think just A is A is the main point that I was trying to make. I was going to say, or a reflection of yourself, but sometimes that is also things that you need to learn. Like what I noticed, like if you find yourself dating the same kind of people, a lot of times that's something that you need to work within yourself, and learning how to set boundaries and learning how to like take care of yourself and self-validate and things like that. And what's funny for me too, though, and I love that you brought that up, because I've noticed I've dated a lot of different kind of people, and I am very ADHD and I like to learn a lot of different things. And so I think I've dated a bunch of different people that I learned tons of different lessons from. And right now, Nanda and I, the thing that we talk about the most, and what is so funny, is that we feel like we are exactly the same person. And we get so mad at each other all the time. And then we both like, we'll be like yelling at each other about something. And then we're like, oh, am I doing what you're doing to me? And then you're doing what I'm doing right back at the same time. So I was like, I hate that. and it can be really powerful though. Like it can be a really good mirror for how to stop doing that, especially if you have somebody that you can work on that with. Like if you are both able to recognize those things. So not dating anyone. Sometimes that's important though. You gotta work on yourself. We're doing better though. Exactly. Just baby steps. Everything happens for a reason. If it keeps happening, you're not learning. It's hard and cruel, but it's true. Another one of those oof things, but yeah, I like that a lot. It's a hard mirror. The whole friendship relationship thing reflecting you is just so harsh. It hurts every time I look back, right? And it sucks because sometimes those are the relationships that you like. Sitting through those hard parts is where we have been learning the most. So sometimes I think, and granted, this is not in every situation, right? Like if you are ever like unsafe, or if you have a partner that is being, toxic or abusive or any of those things, that is not what I'm talking about. Like that's not healthy. If you are able to, emotionally recognize what you're both doing and learn and grow together, then I think that can be a positive situation. I mean, I don't necessarily think if it keeps happening, you're not learning, just maybe you're learning slower. Yeah, well, I think maybe it's that you're not learning what you need to learn from it, right? Like you could be learning. I think we are always learning and growing and stuff in different ways, some at different paces. And if something keeps happening the same kind of way, then maybe the core of that lesson hasn't been fully adapted yet. The last person I dated, I realized how they were making me feel and ended things pretty early on. Yeah, baby steps. I think, yeah, in the initial stages of a lot of relationships, there's kind of that human desire to just want to be wanted. And so you'll kind of, anybody that you're like, you show me attention, this is great. At least I may just be speaking for myself, but I think that is kind of the human want to be loved, but then also finding somebody that actually understands you, that you can grow with, is so much more difficult. Yeah, right, Amanda? You're like, oh my God, you like me? Okay, let's date. Self-reflection and being able to recognize the things that you do need to work on or learn is something that's really important. Kari, I'm joking, but still 15 years single. Either I've been comfortable or I'm a slow learner. Maybe your self-compassion, Akari, is to be gentle with yourself, but also maybe if you don't want to be single, that it's nudging you to get out there more and try dating more. Because unless you put yourself out there too, like trying to find people to date is very difficult, especially in this internet age. GT, I like to think that the reason I'm single is that they like me from far away, but once they find out how neurospicy and weird I actually am, they keep it at the friend stage. I see, and I think that there is somebody for everybody, right? Like, there's a lot of us that are neurospicy, and you just got to find somebody who's neurospicy, fits with your neurospicy. Luther 1 attracts people who will treat them in the way that they treat themselves in a way. I would agree with that. Dating in this economy? Also that. Well, but also it can be cheaper. So just a couple more things that I wanted to... Yeah, bro, exactly. Marry somebody for tax purposes. Help pay rent. So the couple more points that it talked about, right, is self-compassion is a change in attitude, and it's linked with greater well-being as well as superior performance outcomes. So studies are actually showing that self-compassion leads to increased productivity, because self-criticism, when you're motivated by self-compassion, failure isn't an indicator of defeat, but as a learning opportunity. If you self-criticize, it just turns failure into despair. If you remain calm in the face of failure, rejection, and criticism, you experience higher well-being and you're more productive and successful. Self-compassion also leads to decreased stress. So harsh self-criticism activates our sympathetic nervous system. It elevates stress hormones. The sting of self-criticism can be so intense that it stops us from learning and being resilient in the face of failure. That's a big one for me because I'm also very high anxiety, and I think a lot of that is I am so hard on myself all of the time. It creates stress, and then I have more anxiety, and then I'm like all the time, Anybody else? And so self-compassion on the flip side helps activate your biological nurturance and soothing system, and that helps to lead to greater feelings of well-being. And then the last little bit is practices for boosting self-compassion, so how to get a little bit better at it. First one, Brodo, I know that you're a huge fan of your journaling, but writing yourself a letter is a big one too. So imagine that you're writing a letter to your friend. What would a compassionate friend say to you? And write it down and read it later. So like write it as you're writing it to yourself, but as you would a friend, not beating up on yourself. You can write down your self-talk. So write down any self-critical words that come into your mind and then afterwards evaluate that and ask yourself if you would say these things to a friend, which that's a scary one for me because some of the shit that I say to myself, it's bad. It's really bad. And then if I were to sit there, I'd be like, oh my God, like I would not say that to anyone. But I'd say it to myself all the time, and that's okay. Develop a self-compassion. It's not okay, by the way. We are getting out of that habit that's not okay to talk to yourself that way. Another practice is develop a self-compassion mantra. So something that's really easy to remember. So like I was telling you this morning, I read that list of things that you can tell yourself every morning. You could do something that says develop an easy to remember self-compassion phrases to help get a hold of yourself. Like, does anyone have a good one right offhand that you guys could share? My biggest thing is like my word for myself is like take a breath and be gentle, both to myself and to other people, because I can be a little bit blunt and abrasive sometimes too. So just take a breath, be gentle. And then meditation. Meditation is the process by which, through contemplation and relaxation, we can begin to loosen the grip of self-critical thoughts and emotion. Give yourself grace. I love that one. That's a really good one. That's what I always try to remember. Breathe and remember what's important. Yeah. And it's important not to be mean to yourself. Yeah. But Akari, I think that it's important to acknowledge how far you've come and what you've been working on, and that you are working on yourself, and that's okay. And it is okay to have your own pace. There is no timeline for your life. Luther, thank you. It seems useful. A lot of it's familiar, but there's always room to learn. Exactly. And Vinny, because of interactions in school, I started to think that nobody likes me, and that made me close off for the longest time. Made me throw myself into schoolwork and gaming. Twitch helped me open up again 2 summers ago. You asking if I wanted to meet up in Amsterdam was a confidence boost that people do want to get to know me, and because of that, I've made lots of friends. Vinny, I had no idea, but I'm really glad that helped, and it's been so cool seeing you go to like all the cons and just get out there and explore a lot more. That's super cool. You guys. Donuts High School was always on the fringe of everyone's friendship circles. Never one that was close. We're friends at school, but the moment I was let out. Yeah, same. Yeah, give yourself grace. Breathe and remember what's important. I like those. I like to tell myself that I'm stronger than I was yesterday as I made it to the next day. Fizzy, I was such a giant asshole in high school. I mentally block it out, even though it was pretty good for me. Sometimes experiencing things like that is a good thing, because then you're like, oh, I don't want to be like that anymore. And Amanda, very glad I could catch a Mindset Monday. This has been really awesome. My goal for 2025 is Amanda-festing. Good things for myself this year, and I think it'll really help. I love it. Like manifesting, but Amanda-festing. It's perfect. And Vinny, I was always criticized for being myself, and nowadays I feel like people like me for me and not let me be myself, so thank you for being a part of the healing process. I am so honored, and I'm glad to have helped. Just wanted to leave space for if there was anything else anyone wanted to say. Oh, GT, whenever I'm freaking out, I say to myself in my mother tongue, which is Arabic, an affirmation which translates to calm down your terror. I like that. Which, speaking of, I don't think we just take enough deep breaths sometimes. So after that big, lovely conversation, which might have been a little hard-hitting for some people, I think just taking a nice deep breath, just like, and take a couple of those. It's probably good. I've been working on it. I realize sometimes when I read certain things, like GT, I read that, and that calm yourself was like, oh yeah, I should take a deep breath, is important. So if you can hear me, just take a nice deep breath and tell yourself that you got this and you're doing awesome. When I heard the first bit, calm down, my mind went. It said calm your, and then it said terror, and I also read calm your tits in my head. But no, it was more mindful than that. And that's another, when it comes to breathing, sometimes, especially if you're feeling a lot of anxiety, we tend to breathe into our throat a lot. So it's like this really restricted breath. And so if you can do a full breath where you breathe in through your throat and you feel your chest expand and your belly, and you like fully inhale and then you exhale and you like use your abs to press all of the air out, I think it's really important. So anyway, thank you guys for a lovely conversation. We will be talking about building confidence. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. Thank you to everybody who participated, who had thoughts on the topic, who even sat and lurked and listened. I think self-compassion is really important. So big thank you. And I'll be posting this on YouTube for anybody if you want to rewatch it, or if you missed it and want to go back to the beginning. So yeah. Thank you guys.